Introducing Meta Ray-Ban Display, the world's most advanced AI glasses. With a full color display built into the lens of the glasses, it's there when you need it and gone when you don't. Send and receive messages, translate or caption live conversations, collaborate with Meta AI, and more. Be one of the first to try Meta Ray-Ban Display. Visit meta.com/Meta Ray-Ban Display to book a demo and find your pair.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Sooner Nation podcast. I know we did not do our Tuesday night episode this week, but hey, the real job got in the way, limited my availability, but we're here. We're going to break down Oklahoma. We're going to break down South Carolina and answer the big question that's been hovering over Norman this week. Will Oklahoma bounce back or will they spiral? How are the Sooners going to respond after that 23-6 loss to Texas? And look, we talked about it on Sunday night, the follow, the recap of the Red River rivalry. We've seen emotional losses before, but everybody knows that this game, it cuts differently. And that what happened in the Cotton Bowl, it's not just the first loss of the season for the Sooners. It was a reality check. And now Brent Venables and this team, they face a little bit of a crossroads. So do they bounce back with purpose? Was that a learning curve for them, an experience that makes them better? Or does it become like the kind of loss that lingers, it festers, it reshapes your season, and where the same game actually beats you twice? So what I want to do in this episode is I want to unpack all of it. I want to look at mindsets to matchups as Oklahoma prepares to face South Carolina this weekend. And really, I think it just feels like suddenly it's a statement game. So let's start here. Let's start going with last Saturday in Dallas, because it wasn't just a physical loss to the Longhorns. It was mental as well. And I said this in the game in the podcast after the game. Oklahoma's defense fought their hearts out. I mean, they held Texas to just 3 points in the first half. But it was the offensive side of the ball that kind of gave a lot of Oklahoma fans PTSD from what we've seen there in the Cotton Bowl 3 out of the 4 years under Brent Venables. They just couldn't get out of their own way at times. You got the 3 interceptions, you got the abysmal rushing effort, and just drives stalled out too quickly and too often. And so it's the kind of game that tests your belief system. For Brent Venables and the coaching staff, the message this week has to be simple. Just reset and refocus. Offensively, you look at the turnovers. That's what killed you this week. Last week. So what do you do this week? You avoid turnovers, right? The running game disappeared like it has in 5 out of the 6 games this season. You find a way to fix it. The offense at times got predictable. You change it. And these aren't just tweaks. They're habits that I believe need to be rebuilt. And here's the thing. South Carolina is a perfect opponent for that reset. The Gamecocks, they're not a pushover, but they're also not an impossible challenge. And if there's a physical, disciplined game on Saturday, what that would do is it would show that Oklahoma's learned from its mistakes if they can win. So this isn't about chasing perfection anymore, and there never really was. I don't think anybody, if I went back and looked at July and August receipts, I don't know that anybody said Oklahoma's going undefeated in 2025. So it's not about chasing perfection. It's really more or less about regaining that identity that they had through the first 5 games of the season. And when a team takes a hit like what happened last Saturday, the spotlight begins to shift a little bit from the stars of the program to really those guys that are in the trenches fighting, tooth and nail every down. And when you look at what's happening up front with Oklahoma's offensive line, we've seen struggles in every game, but we've not seen them dominated in the trenches like they were last week against the Longhorns. The Texas defense, they dictated everything. And Oklahoma's offensive line, especially on the edges, they struggled with blitz pickup. They struggled with protection assignments. And so if you want to see your offense rebound, you've got to establish someone as the anchor of that offensive line. And because you can't, what they need offensively is they need rhythm. And I know John Mateer didn't get a full week of practice, and he looked like it. And I know the running game has been a struggle all season long, and it was again on Saturday. But what you need rhythm. And without rhythm, or I guess I should say it like this, without stability up front, you can't get that. You can't build that type of rhythm. And so these guys are going to be firmly under the spotlight on Saturday in Columbia. And then I think you look at the secondary for Oklahoma. Think about that Malik Muhammad interception right before the half. That I said both in writing on the website and on the podcast, that changed the trajectory of this game. Oklahoma's about to go up 9-3 and go in the locker room with momentum. Instead, you've got a mistake, and the Sooners are only up 6-3, but it was Texas who carried the momentum into the half and took the lead on their opening drive of the third quarter. And we've said it so many times. So many times. Interceptions, turnovers, fumble recoveries, strip sacks. Those are all turning points in a game. And I mean, 5 out of the 6 games this season, Oklahoma's defense has failed to produce a turnover. And the defensive backs, they've been solid. Overall, they've been solid this year. But now with that one loss on your record, you've got to go from solid to sharp. So things like anticipation, ball skills, communication, all of that needs to step up. All that needs to be elevated. And what that means is the spotlight really turns on leadership. Who are the leaders, offensively and defensively? Who are the guys in that locker room who are shaking things up? Because that's you find out after a game like this, you find out who the real voices are. And look, leadership's not about yelling and screaming. It's not about giving locker room speeches. It's about keeping your teammates confident in what you can do as a team, even when frustration hits. And that should fall on the shoulders of the veterans. It should fall on the shoulders of your team captains and even John Mateer. I mean, he's supposed to be the face and the voice of this team. And, speaking of Mateer, I mean, look, his return was emotional, right? I mean, everybody knows what he means to this offense. But 3 interceptions later, it was pretty clear the timing wasn't there. And I think now you look back, you understanding that no one thought this team was going to go undefeated. And you say, it's okay. I mean, it happens. You take some time off, you have surgery, it happens. So this week between Texas and South Carolina, I think for a guy like that, it's got to be about recalibrating. I mean, he's still the guy. There's no question. No one's questioning that. I don't think anyone's even thrown that around, that he's not the guy. But he also has to prove that he can bounce back. And then I don't know, man. I don't know what to say about Oklahoma's running backs. I just don't. I'm done with Jaden Knott. I said it was Texas. That was my point. That was when I was fishing or cutting baits type thing. I've cut bait on Jaden Knott. I don't know. He can't redshirt. He's played in enough games this season. He can't redshirt. If you listen to the coaches, he's healthy. I just don't think he made the mental transition. I don't think he's picked up this offense blocking schemes. I don't know if it's – I just don't know. I don't know if it's – this isn't the West Coast and things just aren't clicking. I don't know. But what I do know is Oklahoma's got to find a way to run the ball. And it's another abysmal performance, less than 50 rushing yards. And we all know that's not Oklahoma football. And so it looks like, if you listen to what they said, Javonte Barnes gets nicked up, something happens pregame. So Torrey Blaylock, he's your guy. I think you have one running back. I don't know that anybody else is going to step up. And I don't know how else to inject life into the running game. But they've got to find a way. Because without it, I mean, Mateer's going to be under pressure literally every snap. And what we do know is that the performance on the field, offensively particularly, wasn't spectacular. It was lacking. But I also think you got to look at the coaching staff. I think you got to look at the fact that Ben Arbuckle was completely out-coached in this game. And the offense looked predictable. John Mateer didn't have rhythm because Ben Arbuckle didn't have rhythm. And there weren't a lot of adjustments once Texas started pinning its ears back and just coming. But then again, what can you do when you can't block and you can't run? That's why these guys earn, that's why I say that's why they earn the big bucks, right? Because Brent Venables and the staff, they've done an incredible job at transforming this defense into one of the best in the nation. But the offense is still set behind. The offense is still they're not just a step behind. They're like, a mile behind is what it feels like. And I think if you're a fan of this program, like we all are on this podcast, what we want to see this weekend are signs of adaptability. Like, can we see some more motion? Can we see some more misdirection plays? Can we see screens? I know we saw a lot of them, but can we see more? Can we see play action? Can we say anything that would make a defense remain honest? Because you just can't let defenses sit on your routes. That is a death sentence in any conference, much less in the best conference in the world. And I think there's got to be some accountability here. I am not, just to be clear what I'm saying, I am not in any way calling for any coach to be on the hot seat, because this team has improved. The 2025 model is better than the 2024 model. And at 5-1, it's just unrealistic for anybody who wants to call for anybody's job. But there's got to be accountability. And it's got to be across the board. It's not just the quarterback. It's not just the offensive line. It is every position group has to own their piece of what went wrong. And so do their position coaches. And the reason I say that is because when everyone takes responsibility, that's when culture changes. That's when culture strengthens. And I don't think there's anything that happened in Dallas on Saturday that disqualifies Oklahoma from being a contender here in the conference. And in doing so, in doing that, they're still a contender in the playoff race. But the accountability, if it started on, Sunday, even Saturday night, then this week was based on fixing mistakes, owning mistakes, and moving forward. I don't think anybody should be. I don't even think anybody should have their hand hovering over the panic button at this point, much less touching it. Just remember that Oklahoma's had some really good teams, and they have been in this position before. And I know we don't like to talk about Lincoln Riley, but think about that 2021 team. How they rallied for one of the most iconic comebacks in the history of that rivalry. Teams can bounce back from a deficit. They can bounce back from a crazy. Think about the Kyler Murray team, right? They lost to Texas in the regular season, beat Texas in the Big 12 championship game. And we've even seen it in the SEC. Teams like Georgia, Alabama, they've lost rivalry games before, and then they've bounced back to win championships. So the question isn't whether you lose, it's how you respond. And strong teams reset. Weak teams unravel. And Brent Venables preaches accountability and culture. I mean, he's constantly talking about that, like accountability and culture. And so now we get to see what that looks like under pressure. And that's the heart of this week's narrative for this podcast, for this team, for this game. We're not talking about style points. We're not talking about stat lines. We're talking about resolve. And that brings us to South Carolina. This is not just a football game on Saturday. This is a test of character. Because the Gamecocks have their own issues. They've been inconsistent, but they play hard. They'll straight up hit you in the mouth if you're not ready. Oklahoma's never beaten South Carolina that I'm aware of. I tried to look up some things. There's not a long history there. But the Gamecocks are only one of just 4 SEC teams that Oklahoma's not defeated. So that stat alone gives you some motivation if you're this Oklahoma program. Greg McElroy picked Oklahoma to win, but predicted that South Carolina would cover. Stay tuned for more of that. It means that he expects it to be a tight, physical, and low-scoring game. I don't think he's the only one. We'll come back to that. But if Oklahoma comes out disciplined, if they protect the ball, that is the craziest stat. That if they protect the ball, they got to protect the ball. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. But if they can protect the ball, and if they can find a way to establish the run, they'll win this game. They'll take control of it. But if we see the same offensive issues linger, then it's going to be an uncomfortable afternoon. So in my mind, here's what a successful response looks like on Saturday. No turnovers. 0 turnovers. The only time this season Oklahoma has not turned the ball over was when Michael Hawkins played quarterback. You've got to stop turning the football over. So show me you've practiced that. Show me you've worked on that. Show me you've schemed around that. Show me you've done film study on that. Run the football. I don't care who runs the football. I'm at this point where I don't care if it's Tory Blaylock. I don't care if it's John Mateer. I don't care if it's your grandma. Run the football. I think Oklahoma, I've said this all season long, your floor has to be 150 rushing yards. Get long, sustained drives. Remember the drive against Michigan in the fourth quarter? Remember the go-ahead drive against Auburn? Do it. We've seen them do it, and there's nothing about South Carolina that makes us think that they can't do that again. And you've got to get rid of pre-snap penalties as well. You do those things, that's the formula for a bounce back. So, I mean, look, what's it going to be? Well, we'll find out Saturday, but is it going to be bounce back or is it going to be spiral? And we're not talking about, South Carolina. I know they came in and just put a whooping early on Oklahoma and Michael Hawkins last year in Norman. But I don't think you can think about redemption. I don't think you can think about revenge. I think you have to just focus on response. The Texas loss hurt. It exposed flaws. But it also gives Oklahoma a clear blueprint. You know what you have to fix. Fix those details. Rediscover the run game. Maybe, I guess, discover the run game. And then go back to playing complementary football. Don't press. This is a defense that undoubtedly has championship potential. Now, the question we got to look at over the last half of the season is, can the offense rise to meet the potential of the defense? And here, the things that are going to matter, John Mateer's leadership, it's going to matter. Brent Venables' staff, the way his staff makes their adjustments, that's going to matter. And every player who steps onto the field in Columbia is going to have a chance to prove that what happened in Dallas, it didn't define them, it redefined them. And I think that's what's going to show us on Saturday what kind of team this Sooner program has in 2025.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana lets you buy your next car on your terms. Explore a massive inventory online, filter for what matters, and find your perfect match. Then choose delivery to your home or pick it up at one of Carvana's iconic car vending machines. Every car also comes with a 7-day money-back guarantee, so you can make sure it's the right fit. Buy your car on Carvana. Delivery or pickup fees may apply. Limitations and exclusions may apply. See our 7-day return policy at Carvana.com.
Carvana.
Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with this plight? Aha! Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk creating Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at canva.com.
All right, so let's jump in here and talk more X's and O's, the trenches, and what really is going to decide Saturday's game with Oklahoma at South Carolina. You've got to look at what happened against Texas. Tough, emotional loss. But again, we're hitting that reset button and we're putting that behind us. We talked about, the spiral. Well, you got to prevent that. Let it be a wake-up call. And so if you're one of those nerds like me that loves schematics and in-game, like the chess matches, this is one that's going to have a lot of layers to it. Because you look at Oklahoma's defense, they are elite. And they're going to match up against a physical front that South Carolina has. And then on the flip side, you've got a Sooner offensive line that's trying to redeem itself. And then you've got two coaching staffs, one on each sideline, that's kind of looking to, quote, out-adjust the other. So let's talk about what all that means. Let's start with the backdrop here. South Carolina's coming into this game averaging right around 310 total yards of offense per game, 22 points per game. So that's not explosive, but it is efficient enough to win when they protect the football. You see what I'm talking about in that first segment, why ball protection, ball security is so important? But like Oklahoma, they've struggled to establish a consistent run game. 2.9 yards per carry is their average. And that's a big reason why they're struggling and sitting where they are offensively. Lenore Sellers, we all remember him from last year. He's had his flashes, but he's also been under heavy pressure. And I think that's where Oklahoma's defensive front becomes the storyline here. Because the Sooners statistically are among the best in the nation defensively. You look at just over 200 yards allowed per game. Stingy against the run, which is stingy overall, I guess, really, with 3.7 yards per play through the first half of this season. And when you look at this defense, you define them. They're fast, they're disciplined, and they're relentless, particularly on third down. And this is the kind of defense that Brent Venables always envisioned building when he took over the program at Oklahoma. And I think this week is another test of how it kind of holds up against a physical SEC opponent. Now, when you look at the other side of the ball, Oklahoma's offense against South Carolina's front, and I think that's where this game honestly is going to be won or lost. Because the Gamecocks defense is led by the edge rushers. You got two guys who can absolutely wreck a game if they get going early. And after what we saw in Dallas, protecting John Mateer, that's a non-negotiable. So let's go back. Let's start with Oklahoma's defense against South Carolina's offense. I think what you're going to see is a typical Brent Venables game plan. You're going to see Oklahoma mix up the looks all afternoon. I think you're going to see Brent Venables throw in different alignments. They're going to show pressure with linebackers, and then they're going to drop them into coverage. You want to keep Lenore Sellers guessing, and Brent Venables is a master at that. And with South Carolina struggling to run the football, again, we're talking about under 3 yards per carry on average. Oklahoma should have the flexibility to get aggressive on passing downs. And 3rd and long, I believe that is what we've seen, the comfort zone for this defense. Because one thing we've seen all season long, though, is Oklahoma's ability to disguise pressure. So like they'll line up showing 6 men across the front, but then they'll drop 2 out. Then they'll twist 1 through the A gap and make the quarterbacks hesitate. And that's all it takes to create a bad throw. That's all it takes for an opportunity to score a turnover. So the key here is going to be gap discipline. South Carolina's offensive line, they are not dominant, but they'll throw in some traps. They'll throw in some counters. Lenore Sellers can run the ball, so they'll do some draws. They'll do what they can to keep a defense honest. So if you're Oklahoma's front seven, you just do what you do best. You stay home, you read the keys, and you make clean tackles. Now, the secondary is where you kind of start seeing the bigger assignments, in my opinion. I don't believe South Carolina has a receiver who's going to terrify you on paper, but they can scheme some things up in space. They can do shallow crosses. They can do quick outs. The back shoulder throws that we've seen haunt this defense a few times this season, that's all there. But if Oklahoma plays sound coverage and they keep their eyes disciplined, I think they'll be in good shape. I guess what I'm saying, in other words, that this is a game where the defense, I believe, should be able to dictate the tempo and not react to it. Now, flip it around. What South Carolina does well, and how can Oklahoma counter against it? The Gamecocks use tempo, and they use balance. They don't dominate in one phase, but they keep you honest. And when they find rhythm, it's because they move quickly, and they don't give defenses time to substitute or adjust. Now, the good thing is, Oklahoma practice against this style of offense when they go up against their own offense. But South Carolina is going to look to use misdirection, fake jet sweeps, option looks, play action. That's all going to be there with the goal. All they want to do is make the defense hesitate. And if you're Oklahoma's defense, you absolutely cannot bite on that. So they've got to be physical up front. They've got to control the line of scrimmage. And then they've got to make South Carolina earn those yards. And when you look at the other side of the ball for Oklahoma, USC's defensive front is a group that they can, particularly against the struggles that Oklahoma has had on the offensive line, they can cause chaos. And if they haven't found a way to improve from what we saw against Texas, I think there's a solid chance we're going to see them overwhelmed again. So how do you counter that? I think you use this. I mean, obviously, I'm not Ben Arbuckle, right? No one's ever paid me millions of dollars to talk about football and show people how to do it, but I think the use of motion and misdirection is where they're going to have to go. And the reason why is because you want to make defenders shift. You want to reveal, if you're John Mateer, you want to reveal what the coverage scheme is. And if you use motion and mixed direction, that's the best way to do that. You've got to find a way, I believe, also to establish play action. And even if the run game isn't dominant, you just, like I talked about the South Carolina offense, you just need enough to freeze the linebackers. And I think a mix of quick passes and screens, they can slow down the rush as well. But I'm going to go back to what I have said repeatedly in this podcast and what I have said repeatedly throughout the season. You got to protect the football. Pressure can bring two things to a quarterback. Pressure can bring confusion, and pressure can bring panic. And I think both of those things got Oklahoma in a little bit of trouble last week. And Oklahoma, I just don't think the Sooners can afford another game, particularly being on the road. You can't afford another game with multiple turnovers. You can't afford another game with no rhythm. So I think all that circles around, to me, the biggest question mark about this offense is the running game. We've seen it not just against Texas last week. We've seen it all season long. They just can't generate anything on the ground. But you can't, in this conference, you can't run the ball for less than 50 yards and expect to win. You just can't. And so I think this week you look at, it's about variety. Inside zone, outside zone, counters, jet sweeps, quarterback run game. You've got to give South Carolina multiple looks to keep them from teeing off. Motion before the snap, that's your friend, because it forces communication on the defensive side of the ball. And again, it goes back to help John Mateer read the coverage. And I think if you pair just RPO concepts and you let Mateer make quick reads, if he's capable of that, then when those linebackers bite, then you hit the slant. If they stay back, then you hand it off. You keep it simple, you keep it fast, and you keep it decisive. And if it still doesn't work, that's okay. But the problem is you just don't want to have to pivot away from your game plan too early. So you don't want to waste an entire drive running into a brick wall. What you want to do is you want to adjust, and you just want to stay ahead of the chains. And that's the type of in-game adaptability that this offense needs to show, because we didn't see it last week in Dallas. So maybe there's a few individual position matches that we want to keep an eye on. I think you look at offensively Oklahoma's tackles against South Carolina's edge rushers. Is that you know how I like to say the game within the game? If Oklahoma's tackles can hold up, they'll win. They'll win this game. If not, it's going to be a long day. It's going to be a nail-biter. Secondly, I think you look at Oklahoma's linebackers against South Carolina's tight ends and the running backs, because the Gamecocks like to leak players out of the backfield. They like to do short check downs. They like to do delayed routes. And this is where your linebackers, even the cheetah position, they've got to stay disciplined. You don't want to over-pursue. You don't want to miss an assignment here. And then you look at Oklahoma's cornerbacks versus South Carolina's receivers. I don't think it's about star power. I think it's about execution here. Stay tight, stay clean, and don't give up easy yards on third down. And then I think fourthly, you look at Lenore Sellers versus Oklahoma's pressure. He's a mobile quarterback. He can escape. But when he's forced to throw on the run, mistakes happen. And if Oklahoma can collapse the pocket without losing containment, they'll have the opportunity like we saw against Jackson Arnold, to create turnovers. The question is, can they capitalize on that? And finally, special teams. This was to me a huge disappointment Saturday, because I thought special teams would swing in Oklahoma's favor, and it didn't. And we saw, I think, last week the impact special teams can have from the opponent towards us. And South Carolina, they've scored this season off of a punt return. Oklahoma gave up a punt return last weekend. South Carolina has blocked a punt this season. So again, special teams is going to have to be flawless. You got to get good lanes, you got to get solid coverage and no miscues. And you got to, I mean, when you have the chance to kick a field goal, it's got to be true. Because in a tight defensive game, one special teams play, we saw it last week, it flips the entire afternoon. So let's wrap up this segment with a few game flow scenarios, because I think this game could go in a lot of different directions. If South Carolina controls the line of scrimmage and bottles up Oklahoma's running game, the Sooners, they're going to have to make an adjustment quicker, but not too quickly. But if you move to a fast passing game, short throws, rhythm routes, keep John Mateer upright and get the ball out fast. I think if Oklahoma is able to jump out early and gets momentum like they did against Texas last week, this is when you got to push the tempo. This is when you've got to stretch the defense horizontally and vertically. Keep your foot on the gas. If special teams or turnovers special teams mistakes or turnovers start to pile up, you got to simplify. Go back to the basics. Protect the football. Win field position. And discipline and patience, they win more often in physical games than flash and flare does. You don't have to have the biggest play of the day to come out on top. You just got to be the most patient and the most disciplined. And I think at the end of the day, this game's going to come down to two things. It's going to come down to physicality, and it's going to come down to adjustments. We have seen Oklahoma be the most physical team on the field. They were the most physical team on the field against Michigan. They were the most physical team on the field against Auburn, clearly against Temple, clearly, against Illinois State. But they weren't really the most physical team on the field against Texas. It was a draw in physicality. But Texas made the better adjustments, and Oklahoma failed to do that last week. So can they protect the quarterback? Can they run the ball? Can they stay balanced? Can the defense keep doing what it's done all year long? That's dominate and disrupt. Can the defense dictate the tempo? And if those answers come back yes, I think Oklahoma's going to walk out of here with a win. And a lot of that bad taste that's lingering from Texas is going to start to fade. But if not, if that's not a yes across the board, South Carolina is the kind of team that punishes hesitation. So I do think this game, it's going to tell us a lot about who Oklahoma really is, how ready they are for this grind to close out the season, because we're going to learn what type of adjustments they're really capable of making, or are we seeing all they've got? I choose to believe they've got more in the arsenal than what we've seen this year, and Saturday is going to tell the difference on that.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Before we jump into this final segment here, I just want to say thank you to everyone who comes in and listens to our podcast. Thank you for those of you that found us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you're finding us. Thank you so much for being a part of Sooner Nation. I want to just kind of use this final segment to talk about something that doesn't always make the highlight reel, if I can say that, but I do believe it decides football games, especially in a physical conference like this. I want to talk about the margin for error and why every small decision counts in battles. Because after that Texas loss, there's one thing that's clear. Oklahoma didn't lose because of just one big thing. They lost because of a lot of small things: turnovers, penalties, field position, clock management. Those are those little cracks that turn into a complete collapse. And now you're going on the road to South Carolina, and those small details, they're going to matter again. They're going to have an impact on this game. Because this is a conference where many times, most of the time even, the difference between winning and losing is not necessarily talent. And it's even not even the game plan necessarily. It's execution. You've got every program across the board loaded with athletes. You've got every defensive front in this conference can hit. Every cornerback knows how to cover. Every special teams unit has speed. So what separates a win from a loss? I think it's proven that it's in how you handle the moments between the moments. Like the hidden plays, the subtle choices, the situational awareness. And Oklahoma found that out the hard way against Texas. You had a game where the offense was already sputtering, and Oklahoma couldn't afford even one mistake in that game. And yet they made several. You got the turnovers. You got the penalties. Again, the mismanaged clock before the half. You got a special teams broke down. And suddenly that game is wide open with Texas having all the momentum. So each one of those things in their own it just might seem small. But you combine them together, and they turn a winnable rivalry game into what it was. It was a painful lesson. Let's start with the turnovers, right? You've heard of the saying like death by 1,000 cuts, because that's what Oklahoma did to itself last week. John Mateer threw 3 interceptions in his first game back from hand surgery, and every single one of them came at a critical time. And to me, the most critical one was the one before the half. You just felt the air leave the offense. Oklahoma's driving. They're within field goal range. There are points on the table here. But instead of playing smart, you force the ball into the end zone, interception. No points, momentum gone. It has swung to the other sideline. I really believe, I will say this probably the rest of the season. If they take a field goal there, it's a different game going into the halftime. But instead, it was a swing that went Texas's way. Then you add the penalties, 5 flags for 35 yards. It may not look like much, but it's when they came that mattered. Holding penalties on crucial downs, false starts that stalled rhythm. And then the fourth quarter drive was wiped out by a hold on a run that could have flipped momentum back towards Oklahoma again. That's the kind of stuff that defines close games. And then field position. We talked about the week before how Oklahoma was just in good field position all afternoon. But you look at the turnovers, you look at the special teams miscues, and Oklahoma spent too much of that game playing from being inside a hole, if you will. Texas had short fields, Oklahoma had long fields. And that's the type of imbalance that changes the way you call a game. It changes the tempo of the game. And honestly, it changes the confidence. And then you have a dagger like that 75-yard punt return. And that's not just a highlight. That's a momentum shift that breaks the wheel of the team that's already struggling to find their own answers. And so when you combined turnovers and penalties and poor field position, it's like stacking weights on your own shoulders. And you just can't win. You can't win with like that. Let's talk about situational football. That's the part that separates elite programs from everybody else. Oklahoma went 6 for 17 on third downs against Texas. That's barely 35%. Meanwhile, Texas was hovering close to 60%. And there's your story right there. Every time Oklahoma got close, Texas found a way to extend drives. And the Sooners didn't. And then there's the red zone, or I guess you say the lack of one. Oklahoma never reached it, not even once. And we're talking about a program that has playoff ambitions. That is unacceptable. You just can't move the ball. You have to finish drives. It's the difference between 3 points and 7 points or 0 points. And this is another team. They're going on the road to play another team where you just can't leave anything on the field, particularly points. And clock management. I don't know. I'm still mad, I guess, about the end of the half. Because Oklahoma had time and they had momentum, but they let nearly 30 seconds tick away before they snapped it. That's too slow. That's too uncertain. And by the time they took a shot, it was rushed, it was picked off, and it was in the end zone. And like I said earlier, no points, no momentum. And it was to me, I sum that up by saying poor situational awareness by both the coaching staff and the players on the field. And that was the difference between walking into the halftime with confidence and walking in shaking your head. And then there's that hidden game within the game that really boosts championship teams. And let's just be honest here, right? Special teams often gets treated like it's an afterthought. But when you look at games, tight games, special teams is everything. Think about that punt return. Texas flipped the entire script of the game on that one play. Oklahoma went from being within striking distance to really chasing the game. And here's the thing. South Carolina thrives in that type of chaos. They've scored on special teams this year. They're aggressive, they're disciplined, and they know how to turn momentum into points. This is Shane Beamer. For Oklahoma, the message is simple this week. Don't let it happen again. Keep your coverage lanes. They've got to be tight. Punting has to be precise. You can't allow any mistakes, botch snaps, block kicks, that kind of stuff. You don't need to be flashy. You just need to be sound. Because one mistake on special teams can erase 3/4 of good football. It really can. And that's how slim the margins are. And you got all these tactical errors that kind of have a ripple effect. They get into players' heads. After a loss like that, confidence, it can get fragile. Players start second-guessing reads. They start playing hesitant. And they just try too hard to make up for past mistakes. You see it all the time. One turnover leads to a forced throw. One penalty leads to pressing. One missed assignment leads to playing cautious instead of playing free. And the best programs, when you look at the best programs in this conference, you look at Georgia, you look at Alabama, they don't panic. They reset. They breathe. They play the next step. That's what Oklahoma needs to rediscover against South Carolina. You can't play angry. You can't play scared. You have to play composed. You have to trust your preparation. You have to trust your reads. You got to trust your teammates. And you better believe that after what happened in Dallas last week, South Carolina, they're going to try everything they can to test that discipline. They'll push the tempo. They have all season long. They'll bring pressure. They'll feed off any emotion that Oklahoma shows. And so when you talk about a test of execution, sure, it's there, but it's also a test of emotional maturity. Can Oklahoma respond without flinching? Can they keep their poise when the crowd gets crazy, when a call doesn't go their way, when the moment gets heavy. And that's what defines a good team from a great team. So here's the bottom line for Saturday. If Oklahoma wants to rebound against South Carolina, it's not going to be about trick plays. It's not going to be about reinventing the playbook. It's going to be about the details. It's going to be about protecting the football. It's going to be about staying disciplined in penalties. It's going to be about flipping field position. It's about managing the clock and executing in the red zone. It's about playing clean. It's about playing smart and complementary football. Because you don't get second chances in this conference. You either execute within the margins or you don't. And for Oklahoma, this week is about proving that they can learn from Texas, that they can apply those lessons and show the kind of resilience that defines a championship caliber team. So when you go out on Saturday and you take the field against South Carolina, every decision, every block, every snap, every route you run, it has to count. Because this is a game where just the smallest mistake can change everything. So what do we have? Oklahoma sets at a 5.5-point favorite right now. You got an over and under at 43.5. So we always end with score predictions. I've got the Sooners covering. I won't make you wait. I won't hold it out on you. You got the Sooners covering. I got a prediction of 24-13 Oklahoma. That's a 9-point win, which covers a 5.5-point spread. But be careful. I've got you hitting that under 43.5. That's going to, 24-13 is only 37 points. So I was wrong last week. I hope I'm right this week. But what I am thankful of is that you are along this ride with us. Do us a favor. If you're on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're catching us, hit us up, give us a like. Make sure you reach out to us on Instagram, Facebook, be a part of our community. You can find us every day, heartland-sports.com. Enjoy your football this weekend. We'll be back Sunday to break it all down for you. Until then,
I'm gonna be the man